The night I told my parents I was pregnant, my father held the door open and my mother sent me out with one suitcase. I was 16. The only person who took me in was my aunt. She gave me a room, helped me raise my daughter, and left me the farm she had built with her own hands. 22 years later, my parents came back. Not to apologize, they came back for her farmhouse, her land, and everything she left me. My name is Hannah. I am 38. I practice estate and probate law in a small firm outside Pittsburgh. I do wills, trusts, and family inheritance disputes. I am good at it because I have lived inside one of the disputes I see across my desk. Before I moved into estate law, I had spent 8 years as a county prosecutor, and some lawyers in that courthouse still called me prosecutor out of habit. Back then, they knew me by my old last name, Hannah Mercer. I had married quietly the year before my aunt died. My husband, Jonah Reed, was a merchant marine captain, and by the time my parents filed their petition, his ship was already 3 weeks into an ocean crossing. The petition listed me under my married name, Hannah Reed. Welcome to Rose Untold Stories, where we tell emotional stories about family betrayal, forgotten daughters, hidden truths, and the quiet strength it takes to finally stand up for yourself. The night my parents put me out, it was raining. I was 16. I was 4 months pregnant. I had been holding the news for almost 2 months because I had not known how to tell them. I told them in the kitchen on a Tuesday in early March after dinner. My father, Gordon, was a foreman at a steel fabrication plant. My mother, Linda, was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. They were the kind of people who paid the mortgage on time and went to church on Sundays. My mother set down the dish she was drying when I told them. She did not look at me. She looked at my father. My father stood up from the table. He did not yell. I had been afraid he would yell. He did something worse. He walked to the front of the house. He stood at the front door for a long minute, with his back to me. Then he turned around and he told me, in the careful voice of a man who had already decided what he was going to say before he had heard me say a word, that I could not stay in his house any longer. My mother went upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table while she packed. I could hear drawers opening and closing. I could hear her footsteps on the stairs. She came down with a single suitcase, the green one my parents had bought for me when I was 12, for a summer trip to my grandparents. She had packed it in 5 minutes. She did not look at me when she set it by the door. She went back upstairs. She did not come down again. My father held the door open. I picked up the suitcase. I walked out. The door closed behind me. I heard the chain catch. It was raining. I stood on the front step for almost 3 minutes. I had nowhere to go. My boyfriend, the boy who had gotten me pregnant, was already in the army. His mother had told me a month earlier, when I had called her, that there was no point in writing to him about it. I had one place left. My father's older sister, Cora, lived just outside town, at the end of a long gravel road, on a small farm she had bought herself when she was younger. I had only been to her farm a handful of times in my life. My father did not speak to her much. My mother did not speak to her at all. My aunt was, in my family's vocabulary, the one who had made things difficult. I had never been told exactly how. I started walking. I walked for half an hour. The rain had slowed, but I was still soaked by the time I saw the white-painted mailbox at the end of the gravel drive. The handle of the suitcase had gotten slippery. My shoes were wet through. I was crying without knowing I was crying. The farmhouse was set back about a quarter mile from the road. I could see the kitchen light through the trees. I walked up the gravel. I stood on the porch for almost a full minute before I knocked, because I did not know what I was going to say. Cora opened the door. She was in her early 50s then. She had her hair tied back. She was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. She had a dish towel in her hand. She looked at me. She looked at the suitcase. She looked at my soaked clothes and my hair stuck to my face. She did not ask me a single question. She stepped back from the door. She held it open. She told me, in the low, calm voice that I would come to know better than almost any voice in my life, to come inside. I came inside. She closed the door. She took my coat. She walked me to the kitchen. She pulled out a chair and sat me at the table. She poured a mug of tea from a pot that was already on the stove. She set the mug in front of me. She sat down across from me. She told me, in the same low voice, that I could stay as long as I needed to. She did not ask me what had happened. She did not ask me about my parents. She did not ask me about the boy. She did not ask me anything. She just told me I could stay. I cried at her kitchen table for almost an hour. She put a small plate of toast in front of me at some point. She did not eat. She just sat with me. I opened the suitcase that night, on the floor of the small guest room she walked me to. The room was at the back of the farmhouse, with a window that faced the pasture. I opened the suitcase to find a clean shirt to sleep in. The suitcase had been packed in 5 minutes. I knew this because I had been counting in the kitchen while my mother had been upstairs. She had packed what would fit: 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, underwear, a toothbrush, the book I had been reading the night before. At the bottom of the suitcase, folded under the book, was a small envelope. The envelope had $200 in it, and a piece of paper with one line of my mother's handwriting. The line said, "Do not tell your father I gave this to you." I sat on the floor of my aunt's guest room with the envelope in my hand for a long time. 4 crisp 50s from the bank folded together. My mother had put them in my suitcase in the same 5 minutes she had been packing. She had not said a word to me about it. She had not come downstairs to see me leave. I have kept the note for 22 years. I have not spent the $200. I lived with my aunt for the next 11 years. I gave birth to my daughter Eden. My aunt drove me to every appointment. She paid for the hospital bills with a savings account she had built up over decades from her work as a bank teller. She was the first person to hold Eden after I did. I finished my senior year by correspondence courses because after everything that happened, I could not bear walking those halls anymore. My aunt drove me to the testing center an hour away from my diploma. She baked a small cake for me when I came home. She had written my name on it in icing. I started community college in the spring. I worked weekends at a diner in town. My aunt watched Eden while I worked. I transferred to a 4-year college a few years later. I got into a law school in Pittsburgh on a partial scholarship. I drove 40 minutes each way for 3 years to attend night classes. My aunt watched Eden every evening. She made dinner. She put Eden to bed when I was not home. She helped Eden with her math homework when I was studying for the bar. Eden grew up on that farm. She learned to ride a horse on the small mare my aunt kept in the back pasture. She learned to bake bread with my aunt in the kitchen. She did her homework on the wooden porch swing in the spring and fall. She knew the names of every chicken in my aunt's coop. I learned, slowly, what my father's family had done to my aunt when she was younger. My aunt had been pregnant once before she had bought the farm. She had not been married. The man she had loved had died in a logging accident 3 months before the baby was due. My grandfather had told her she could not bring the baby home to the family. Her parents had not fought him. She had given birth alone, in a hospital in Erie. The baby had been stillborn. She had buried him by herself. She had bought the farm years later, with money she had saved by living in a single room and eating 1 meal a day for a long time. She had not opened her door to a family member in decades before the night I stood on her porch. She told me, one evening when Eden was small, sitting on the porch swing with me, that the reason she had opened the door for me without asking a single question was because she had spent her whole adult life waiting for someone to open a door for her, and no one ever had. She had decided, when she had pulled into her gravel driveway alone for the first time after closing, she had been waiting for someone to need her. I told her she did not have to wait anymore. She nodded. She did not say anything else for a long time. The wren came out of the apple tree at the edge of the porch and landed on the railing. Cora pointed at it without speaking, the way she had pointed at hundreds of birds with Eden over the years. Eden, who was sitting between us with a book in her lap, looked up and smiled. Cora called Eden her wren after that day. It was a private name. The family did not know. Just the 3 of us on that porch. Cora passed away the spring before this story begins. She was in her early 70s. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the previous fall. She had refused aggressive treatment. She had told me, sitting at her kitchen table with a stack of medical pamphlets between us, that she had lived her life the way she had wanted to live it, and she did not want to spend her last year of it in a hospital being told what to do by people who did not know her. She lived for almost 6 months after the diagnosis. Eden, who was home for the summer between her junior and senior year of college, came home and stayed. Eden was studying agricultural science. She wanted to take over the farm one day. My aunt had known. She'd been quietly teaching her everything she knew about the land, the animals, the books, the seasonal work. We had my aunt at the farmhouse for her last weeks. A hospice nurse came twice a week. Eden and I took turns sitting with her. The day before she passed, when she was still lucid for short stretches, she asked me to bring her a small wooden box from the top shelf of her closet. I brought it down. She did not open it. She told me she wanted me to have it. She told me not to open it until after. She told me in a voice that was very tired but very clear that the door she had opened for me 22 years earlier had been the door she had needed someone to open for her once. She told me she had been the luckier of the two of us, because she had been the one who got to do the opening. I did not understand what she meant that day. I have come to understand it since. She passed away the next morning, just after sunrise, with Eden holding her hand and me at the foot of the bed. The wren in the apple tree at the edge of the porch was singing. The funeral was small. About 30 people came. A few of my aunt's neighbors, the hospice nurse, 2 women from her church, 3 of her old colleagues from the bank, my daughter, me. My parents did not come. My sister Caroline did not come. None of my father's other siblings came. I had not invited any of them. None of them had asked. The will was read the following week, in the office of the small-town lawyer my aunt had used for her affairs. A man named Bernard Cora had left her farm to me. The farmhouse. The land that came with it. The small farm operation she had been running for decades. All of it. To me. With the explicit instruction that if I chose to pass it on to Eden, the farm should pass intact. Bernard told me my aunt had asked him to give me one more thing. He handed me a sealed envelope. I drove home. I sat on the edge of the bed in the room I had stayed in the night I had arrived at 16. I opened the envelope. Inside was a typed letter from my aunt. The first 2 pages were about the farm. Which fields needed to be rotated. Which fences would need to be replaced. Which equipment was old and which was good for another decade. The 3rd page was about something else. She had written, in the last paragraph, "There is an offer on the back parcel. A construction company. They have been writing me for almost 2 years. They want the acres at the back of the property. They have offered $4 million. I have not responded to them. I will not respond to them. They will write you when they hear I am gone. You can do what you want with it. I would not sell the wren's nest in that back hedgerow, but it is your land now, and you should know what it is worth, because someone will come for it." I sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in my hand and I cried for a long time. I did not cry about the $4 million. I cried because she had known. She had known they would come. The first letter from the construction company arrived 3 weeks later. I sent a brief response declining. I told them the property would not be available for sale at any price. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. About 6 weeks after the funeral, on a Tuesday afternoon, I came back to the farm from work. Eden was home for a long weekend. She looked up when I came in. She told me there were 2 people in the front parlor who had been waiting for almost an hour and who had refused to come back another day. I walked through to the parlor. My mother and my father were sitting on the couch. I had not seen either of them in 22 years. My mother had aged in a way that I had only seen in photographs at the funerals of distant relatives. Her hair was completely white. She was smaller than I remembered. My father had a cane next to his chair. They were both dressed the way they had always dressed for important things. My father stood up when I walked in. He had to put his hand on the back of the couch to stand up. He told me, in a voice that had become smaller in 22 years, but was still the voice of the man who had held the door open for me on the night I had told them I was pregnant, that they needed to talk to me about my aunt's farm. I did not sit down. I asked them how they had known about the farm. He told me my aunt's lawyer had been required to notify them as members of the extended family that the estate had been settled. This was true. Bernard had told me about it in advance. He told me my aunt had been an old woman at the end. He told me my aunt had not been thinking clearly. He told me they were not blaming me. He told me he was sure I had not pressured her in any way. He told me in the same careful voice he had used 22 years earlier that the farm was family property. He told me my mother and he were entitled to a share. He told me he had spoken to a lawyer in town. He told me they would be filing a petition. He used the word petition the way some men use the word formality. My mother had not spoken yet. She was looking at her lap. She had her hands folded. I asked her if she had anything to say. She looked up at me. She told me, in a voice that was so quiet I almost did not hear it, that she had thought about me every day. I asked her, in the same quiet voice, why she had not called. She did not have an answer for that question. She had been looking for one for 22 years. She had not found it. I told my father he could file whatever he wanted to file. I told him I would see him at the petition hearing. My mother started to cry on the couch. My father picked up his cane. He stood. He took my mother's elbow. They left through the front door of the farmhouse my aunt had left to me. I closed the door behind them. I locked it. I went into the kitchen. Eden was at the counter. She had been listening. She had not come in. She asked me, very quietly, who those people were. I had never introduced her to them. I had told her, when she was small, that I had a mother and a father who had not been able to take care of me when I had needed them, and that her Aunt Cora had taken care of me instead, and that the people who took care of you were the family you got to keep. I told her, that afternoon in the kitchen, that the two people who had just been in the parlor were my mother and my father. She set her cup down. She came around the counter. She put her arms around me, she said, into my shoulder, the same words she had said when she was 5 years old and I had told her something hard about the world. She said, in the voice she had been using to mean okay since she was a small child, "I see." The petition was filed by a lawyer named Mark from a small firm in my parents' town. I knew his name. I had seen him around the county courthouse over the years, but we had never handled a case together. On paper, he had filed against Hannah Reed. In that courthouse, he had known me as Prosecutor Mercer. The petition argued 3 things. First, that my aunt had been unduly influenced in her final years by me. Second, that the family had a claim to the farm because my aunt had purchased it with funds that had originated from a small inheritance from my paternal grandparents. Third, that the farm's recent appraisal suggested a value far in excess of what could reasonably be considered a single niece inheritance. The first claim was the dangerous one: undue influence. A vulnerable elderly woman, a relative who had moved in. The legal pattern was real, even if the facts were not. I called Bernard. I told him I would be handling the response myself. Bernard told me my aunt had left him a sealed packet, with instructions to give it to me only if a petition like this one was filed. He had been holding it in his office safe for almost 2 years. I drove to his office that afternoon. The packet was a large manila envelope, taped shut, with my name on it in my aunt's careful handwriting. Bernard told me he did not know what was inside. She had been very specific that he was not to open it. I opened it at the kitchen table at the farmhouse that evening. Eden was at school. The house was quiet. I made tea. I sat down. I cut the tape with a kitchen knife and I emptied the envelope onto the table. There were almost 200 pages inside. The first 40 pages were a journal my aunt had kept, beginning the night I had arrived at her door at 16. The entries were short, most were 2 or 3 sentences. They were dated. They covered 22 years. She had written an entry on the night she had taken me in. She had written entries during my pregnancy. She had written one the day Eden was born. She had written one every year on Eden's birthday. She had written one every year on the anniversary of the night I had arrived. She had written, in entries scattered across the years, about my parents, about what they had done, about what they had not done. She had written, in an entry from the 3rd year, that she had once driven into town and parked across from my parents' house, and had sat in the car for almost an hour and had not gone to the door. She had not been able to decide what she would say if my father had opened it. She had driven away. She had written in an entry from the 7th year that my mother had come to the farm gate one Saturday morning when I had been at college and Eden had been in school. My mother had stood at the gate for 15 minutes. She had not come up the drive. My aunt had watched her from the kitchen window. My mother had eventually turned and walked back to her car and driven away. I had not known about either of those visits. My aunt had never told me. The next 60 pages were copies of every piece of paper that documented my and Eden's life on the farm. Medical bills from my pregnancy. Eden's birth certificate. Eden's school records, all of them. My college transcripts, my law school transcripts. My bar admission. The diner pay stubs from my weekend job. The framed certificate of my admission to the bar. The next 60 pages were the farm records. Tax returns. The original purchase paperwork from when my aunt had bought the farm. The bill of sale was a copy of the cashier's check my aunt had written to the previous owner, drawn on her personal bank account. The funds had come, in their entirety, from my aunt's own savings. None of it had come from any inheritance. Both of my paternal grandparents had been alive and well when my aunt had bought the farm. The next 20 pages were a letter my aunt had drafted and not sent, addressed to my father. The letter ended with a single paragraph. If you are reading this, it is because Hannah is sitting across from you in a courtroom, and you have decided that the door I opened to your daughter on the night you closed yours is something you have a claim to. You do not. The farm was paid for with my money. The years were paid for with my hours. The child who calls me grandma was raised by my hands. You did not lift a finger. You did not pick up a phone. You did not come to a graduation. You did not come to a birthday. The last 10 pages were a sworn statement my aunt had made, signed and notarized, months before her death. The statement attested to her clarity of mind. It attested to the source of the farm's funding. It attested to her unforced decision to leave the farm to me. The statement closed with one paragraph that she had asked the notary to include verbatim. My niece did not come to my door asking for an inheritance. She came to my door asking for a safe place to sleep. The farm I am leaving her is the door I should have had myself once and did not. I am not leaving it to her as a reward. I am leaving it to her so that she never has to stand in the rain again. I sat at the kitchen table with the packet in front of me for a long time. Then I called Bernard. I told him I would be filing my response by the end of the week. I told him I would not be settling. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the county courthouse. Jonah knew about the hearing, but he was somewhere in the Atlantic. My parents arrived with Mark at 9:45. My father walked with the cane. My mother held his other arm. They sat at the petitioner's table. I came in at 9:50. I was wearing the dark blue suit I wore for hearings. I was carrying the folder I had prepared. Mark looked up. He saw me. For almost 5 full seconds, he did not move. Then he turned to my parents. "Wait," he said. "You sued a prosecutor?" My father turned and looked at me for the first time since I had walked into the courtroom. Mark stood up, walked to my table, and extended his hand. "Good morning," he said. I shook his hand. "Good morning, Mark." He went back to his table. He sat down. He leaned in toward my father and spoke for almost a full minute, very quietly, with his hand on my father's arm. My father did not respond. My father was looking at me from across the room. The judge came in. The hearing was called to order. Mark stood. He stated the petitioner's claims. He stated them carefully. He had clearly been reconsidering his strategy in the previous 5 minutes. I stood. I introduced myself. I stated, briefly, that I would be presenting documentary evidence that conclusively answered each of the petitioner's claims. I handed the bailiff the folder. The folder went to the judge. I did not speak during those minutes. Nobody did. The courtroom was very quiet. My mother sat at the petitioner's table with her hands in her lap. She did not look at the judge. She did not look at Mark. She did not look at my father. She looked at me. She looked at me. The judge finished reading. He looked at Mark. He asked him if the petitioner wished to proceed with the claims as filed, in light of the documentary record now before the court. Mark stood up. He told the judge the petitioner would be withdrawing the claim of undue influence. He told the judge the petitioner would also be withdrawing the claim regarding inherited funds, as the bill of sale documentation made clear that no inherited funds had been involved in the purchase of the property. The judge looked at Mark for a moment. Then he looked at my father. He told my father, in the way that some judges speak to elderly petitioners they have decided are wasting the court's time, that the documentary record before him showed that the property in question had been purchased by the decedent with her own funds, maintained by the decedent for decades, and bequeathed to a beneficiary the decedent had clearly identified. He told my father that there was no share of the property for the petitioner to claim. The court would not be making any award to the petitioner. He thanked us all for our time. He left the bench. The hearing was over. It had taken less than an hour. My father did not move from his seat. My mother did not move either. Mark packed up his folder. He stood up. He shook my father's hand, briefly. He left. I stood up. I gathered my folder. I closed it. I tucked it under my arm. I started to walk out. My mother stood up. She crossed the well of the courtroom. She stopped about 3 feet away from me. She did not reach for me. She did not say anything for almost a full minute. Then she told me in the same quiet voice she had used at the farmhouse that she had something she wanted to say. I waited. She told me in a voice that broke twice in 2 sentences that she had put $200 in my suitcase the night I had left. She told me she had not been able to do more than that. She told me she had spent 22 years thinking about it. She told me she knew it had not been enough. I looked at her for a long moment. I told her she was right. It had not been enough. I told her I had kept the note. I told her I had not spent the money. I told her the money was in an envelope in my desk drawer at the farm, in the same drawer where I kept my will. I told her I was glad she had put it in. I told her I had not been sure until I had found the envelope at 16 that she had wanted me to live. She started to cry then. She did not try to hide it. She stood in the well of the courtroom with tears running down her face and her hands at her sides. I did not hug her. I told her she could call me if she wanted to. I told her I would not promise to answer. I told her I would not be inviting her to the farm. I told her she had a granddaughter who did not know her, and that if my mother wanted to know her, my mother would have to find a way to earn that, and that the way to earn it did not start with a courtroom. She nodded. She walked back to my father. He had not moved. She helped him to his feet. They walked out of the courtroom together. I drove home to the farm. Eden was on the porch when I got there. She had come home from school for the day to be near the phone in case I had needed her. She was sitting on the swing. I sat down next to her. She asked me what happened. I told her. All of it. The petition. The folder. The judge. Her grandmother's words at the end. Eden listened. When I had finished, she did not say anything for a long time. Then she told me she had been thinking, in the weeks since my parents had come to the farm, about something Aunt Cora had told her once. Eden had been about 10. She had asked my aunt on the porch swing on a fall afternoon why my parents had never come to the farm. My aunt had told her, in the way she explained hard things to children, that some people lost the people they loved because they could not figure out, when it mattered most, what love asked of them. Eden had asked her if those people ever figured it out. My aunt had said yes, sometimes, but usually too late. Eden told me, on the porch swing that afternoon, that she thought my mother had figured it out. Too late, but figured it out. I told her I thought she was right. The wren came out of the apple tree at the edge of the porch and landed on the railing. Eden pointed at it, without speaking, the way my aunt had pointed at hundreds of birds with her over the years. We sat there for a long time. I have not seen my father since the courtroom. He is not called. He is not written. My mother and I have spoken 3 times. Each time she has called me. Each time the call has been short. She has asked about Eden. I have answered. She has not asked to visit. I have not invited her. I do not know what will happen next between us. I have stopped trying to know. The farm is mine. The construction company that wrote to me after the appraisal has written twice more. I have declined both times. The back hedgerow, where the wren's nest is still there. The cattle are still in the pasture. The chickens still have their coop. Eden is in her last semester at school. She has told me she wants to come home to the farm when she is done. I have told her the room she grew up in is hers. I have kept the $200. The 450s. They are in the envelope my mother packed them in. The envelope is in the drawer of my desk in the farmhouse office. I have not spent them. I have not opened them again. I do not know what I will do with them. I have decided, for now, that not knowing is enough. Who in your life opened a door for you when everyone else closed theirs? Drop their name in the comments. If this story reached you tonight, write your city below. I would love to know who is sitting here with me. There is one thing I learned from all of this, and it is the last thing I want to share. The family you are born into is not always the family that raises you. The door you knock on at 16, soaked through and out of options, sometimes opens to a woman you have only met twice, holding a dish towel. She does not have to take you in. She has been waiting for years for someone to need her, and she has decided that whoever knocks will be enough. That woman is family. The people behind the door you left are something else. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves.